Good afternoon. After what I hope was a nice summer break, I'm happy to welcome everyone to the September regular meeting of the Calgary Police Commission. I will now call this meeting to order and ask that everyone ensure that your microphones are muted until you need to speak. My name is Sean Cornett, and I am the chair of the commission. I'm joined today by Commissioners Amtul Siddiqui, Marilyn North Pagan, Susan Mallon, Kim Lynch-Proctor, Heather Campbell, Teresa Rossell, TJ Tsong, Jeff French, Cherie Nyson-Jordan, Kelly Ogle, Robert Tanguay, and Councillors Jennifer Winus and Raj Dhaliwal. Both Commissioner Ayo Edudran and Chief Constable Mark Neufeld send their regrets as they are unable to be here. Today's Calgary Police Service representatives are led by Acting Chief Chad Tofik. Acting Chief, could you please introduce those you expect to speak during today's meeting?
Thanks very much, Chair Cornett. I'm happy to introduce everyone here and who will be speaking. I'll start with the gallery. We have Sandra Jacobi, Director of the Professional Standards Section, Staff Sergeant Del Vella, Staff Sergeant Professional Standards Section, Acting Superintendent Sheldon Scott, who was overseeing the World Petroleum Congress initiative. And then from my right on the table here, we have Mike Nunn, who's the Director of Strategic Communications, Catherine Murphy, the Exec Director of Legal and Regulatory Division, Tricia Spademan, the Acting Exec Director of Finance, Raj Gill, Deputy Chief, and he's moving into the Bureau of Community Policing. And to my left, Claire Smart, Superintendent and Executive Officer to the Chief, Katie McClelland, Deputy Chief for the Bureau of Service and Organizational Support, Ryan Aliff, the Acting Deputy Chief of the Bureau of Investigative Support, and the newest member of the executive on the first commission meeting, the Chief People Officer, Kim Armstrong, sitting on my right here. And on behalf of Chief Neufeld, we'd like to officially welcome her to the executive leadership team. She'll be taking over the role, as I mentioned, as Chief People Officer with the Bureau of People and Organizational Development. Kim has an impressive professional background in provincial and municipal government, as well as law enforcement. Her most recent role was as the Deputy City Manager for Employee Services at the City of Edmonton. And previous positions also include the Deputy Minister for 2 portfolios in the Government of Alberta, as well as the Acting Deputy Minister and Deputy Attorney General and Associate Deputy Minister for the Alberta Ministry of Justice and Solicitor General. So welcome aboard, Kim. Thanks, Chair.
Sorry. Thank you everyone for being here, and we appreciate your attending in person to our new spaces. For those who are not familiar with our role, the Commission is a body of 13 community members and 2 city councillors appointed by City Council and the Government of Alberta. We provide independent citizen governance and oversight of the Calgary Police Service on behalf of all Calgarians. To protect the political neutrality of the police, Alberta's Police Act requires that the police chief report directly to us instead of elected officials. We provide direction to the police through the chief, police policies, monitoring the police complaint process, and approval of how the police budget is spent. Today is one of 8 regular meetings we have each year to openly discuss police governance and oversight matters with the service's leadership and to hear from the public. We also have several private monthly committee meetings where commissioners work more directly with the service on various matters that cannot be discussed publicly. Our commission is meeting today on the ancestral and traditional territory of the Blackfoot Confederacy, made up of the Siksika, Piikani, Ombibi, Piikani, and Kainai First Nations. We are also home to the Iathka, Nakota, Wetaskiwé First Nation, comprised of Chiniki, Bearspaw, and Goodstoney First Nations, as well as Tsuut'ina First Nation. These are the people who made a treaty with the Crown, forming Treaty 7 territory. Calgary is also homeland to the historic Northwest Métis and to the Métis Nation of Alberta. As we will be marking Canada's National Day for Truth and Reconciliation on Saturday, today is especially important for us to recognize the legacy of colonialism and racism that we inherited as Canadians. Our commission is committed to doing our part to address the inequity and intergenerational trauma caused by past and current wrongs to support reconciliation with all Indigenous people who share this land with us. Our commission also condemns racism and prejudice in all forms and is committed to being anti-racist. We stand in solidarity with all Calgarians who are Black, Indigenous, or other people of color. As part of our journey towards reconciliation, we have sought the blessing of elders to display a Treaty 7 flag in our new boardroom that we are meeting today for the first time. We want it to serve as a visual reminder that every meeting that First Nations people have a special place in our community, and we have a role in addressing the wrongs of the past and inequities of today so that we can all build a better future together. We are honored today to have Siksika Elder Clarence Wolflag here with us. He has agreed to offer a prayer and a blessing for us as our commission starts a new chapter in this new meeting space.
Okay, well, I thank you for inviting me, and my colleague Marilyn gave me a last minute call. It's like the military, passing the buck, and I think I hold a higher rank than the Marilyn, should have more respect. But she's on the police commission, so I got to honor that. Anyways, I'm glad to see you. I took a direction north, and I don't think it's over here. I used to hang out in Bow Valley Square a lot. How could I forget? So with that, I'm going to offer you a blessing. I also like to do a special prayer for the officer that went down in BC. I was an officer for 14 years. I created 3 police forces in Alberta, Bloods, Louisville, and sometimes I advise Shutina. I also was with Dakota Ojibwe when they were getting started, and a Six Nation police force in Ontario. And I used to chair the First Nation policing group when we were dealing with the policy. And I'm going to get our police department back in full strength. And I talked to the chief of police and the mayor. We probably will be training our officers in the city with the city police. So I think that's in the works. So we'll be closer to home and working with our fellow police force in the city, our CMP and sheriffs on the street. So with that, I'll pray. Kapua kamukinaanoktiskoi kaaki aamaksookaavat tuomeneksi aamaksi innakiikoeksi anniksi aattiitskatsi anniksi aamaksi innakiikoeksi taatiitskatawe. Oke matpatsemuiskanakaa innakiikoa niin, että mistä niissä on sokousiksi, jotka näeksuu koeksi, jotka noppaatsemui. Eikö iskana piinnakia puutaksin. Okenokka kammukina niistä päätä pio. Aakutokana soka piiksana pino. Aika että pino mohkinstis iitoiksi. Okehkomaan suut. Aatsi uotsuut kaakimatopinan. Annika nyt siimoksinaan. Kita kohkatsi kahkiminne. Anniksi innakin koek taakattomata puutsiksi kai. Kiisti päätä pio. Netkana sihkomaanneksi staapiiksi. Sueksu tiistä piksuukkuaueeksi, kanassoksi päätä piuksen. Aukena kana tuita pinoki piskutukinnaan. Iksi koonne kinnakää puutaksen, ekotkuikio pinnakikoe. Aukena kilkan staapääksi matsiitsi noksiitsikoi. Anna kaakki viikanaa kiveka, nohkista pistaka kaksi tahamauttakai. Anne kilkan stin katsomatana kana tuita piuak. Nohkoksi katupinan, napiu sinistä watsemaan, kammuttaan jahti päätä.
Thank you very much, Elder Wolflag. We're very grateful to have you here today. For those joining us for the first time, allow me to provide a brief overview of the format for our meeting today. The public session of this meeting is being live streamed, and recording will be posted online so that we can make it available to those unable to attend. There will be several presentations from the Calgary Police Service, Commission members, and Commission staff. Commissioners will each have a chance to ask questions or make comments after each one. Once we've completed the presentations, we'll move to the public participation portion of the meeting. Those who are registered to speak will then be called on by name and will have a chance to either ask a question or make a presentation for our consideration. Following the public participation, we will close the public portion of the meeting with the Chief and I taking questions from the media. Everyone is welcome to observe the media availability, but only the media can participate. To start our agenda items, I will now call for declarations of pecuniary interest or conflict of interest from the commissioners. Hearing and seeing no declarations, I will now ask for approval of the agenda. Does any member of the commission wish to request an amendment to the agenda? Hearing and seeing none, I will now ask for approval of the consent agenda. For those viewing today's meeting, the consent agenda is a list of routine items and reports that all commissioners agree can be accepted without more discussion or a separate vote. Does any member of the commission wish to request an item on the consent agenda be brought forward for discussion? Hearing and seeing no requests, I declare both the agenda and the consent agenda approved as presented. I would like to start my chair's report by offering our commission's condolences to the family and friends and colleagues of RCMP Constable Rick O'Brien. Constable O'Brien was shot along with 2 colleagues while executing a search warrant in Coquitlam, BC. His death continues what has been a shocking and unacceptable rise in violence towards police officers in the last couple of years. His murder occurred just days before Police and Peace Officer Memorial Day, which Alberta marked in Edmonton on Sunday. Our province alone added the names of 3 fallen police officers to our Pillars of Strength Memorial this year. Constables Brett Ryan and Travis Jordan from the Edmonton Police Service, and Constable Harvinda Singh Dhami from the RCMP. This violence cannot continue, and we will continue to call on all levels of government to work together to stop it with legislative changes and stronger intervention supports that can prevent these incidents. Looking back at the summer, our commission was able to get a bit of a break. However, we still have a few highlights to share. Several commissioners and our executive director attended the Canadian Association of Police Governance Conference to collaborate with our peers across the country on issues facing police boards and commissions. Calgary was prominently featured at the conference as Commissioner Siddiqui presented with members of the Calgary Police Service on the work that has been done in our city to respond differently to people in crisis because of addiction or mental health. We also had a commissioner and staff member attend the Safety of Our Cities conference in Edmonton. That conference brought together law enforcement, government officials, social agencies, and governance bodies to try and find better ways to protect the safety of everyone in our communities. Calgary was also featured at the conference with the service's youth intervention experts and equity, diversity, inclusion expert presenting. Calgary's Firearms Lab was also praised by panelists as it made Calgary one of only 4 cities in the country that are able to do ballistics analysis within a couple of days rather than weeks or months. Our commission also met twice with council over the summer. This included an in-camera information sharing session and a presentation last week to council's audit committee. This summer saw us take a new approach to public consultation as we held our own one-day conference with representatives from community associations, local not-for-profit agencies, business associations, religious and cultural organizations, and other government agencies, city council, and the province. Over 300 people participated in the Calgary Policing Summit, and it gave us and the service an opportunity to hear from Calgarians on what's most important to continue to include in our 2024 annual policing plan. I again want to thank everyone that attended and all the presenters and facilitators from the service for making the summit such a great day. Finally, our staff were busy over the summer finishing the renovations and settling in our new office space. This meeting is the first time we've seen the space as commissioners, and we're very excited to have a space that will better meet our needs and better support our hybrid meetings and live streams. As our staff get used to the new technology in the room, there might be some bumps along the way today, but we know this space will be a big improvement. The summer was also busy for members of the service, and I want to briefly recognize some of the many ways they delivered on the priorities of the Commission and the Calgarians. Our city experienced several more homicides, bringing our total for the year to 16. Investigators have continued to work hard to hold people accountable for these deaths, and charges have now been laid in 10 of this year's cases. During the same time, our commission received a letter of thanks from the Tsuut'ina Nation Police Service, thanking the service for their help during their own homicide investigation. As the investigation drew significant resources from TNPS, patrol officers from CPS partnered with TNPS patrol teams to help maintain regular policing services. Efforts to curb gun violence also continued to show great results, with shootings continuing to decrease compared to last year. This work is really a credit to the entire service, as everyone from patrol officers to specialty units to community engagement teams to those in the forensic labs have all helped get illegal guns off the street and hold violent offenders accountable. The service also continued to show a commitment to compassionately addressing crime and social disorder connected to encampments. The service will likely share more on this later, but officers worked with numerous partners to remove an encampment in the southeast and connect people living there with supports. Crime and disorder at C-train stations was also the focus of targeted enforcement aimed at those trafficking drugs in these areas. Our transit system continues to get safer as the service remains focused on working with partners to address this important issue. The service also took steps to make our community more inclusive and address past injustices. In July, a partnership with Deaf and Hear Alberta has given officers instant remote access to American Sign Language interpreters. The service also announced yesterday, with all other Alberta police agencies, that they are implementing another Truth and Reconciliation Commission call to action by waiving the fees for Indigenous people to get the criminal background checks and fingerprinting that is often required to reclaim names that were changed at residential schools or during 60s scoop. And finally, I want to recognize the major policing event work that has kept many officers busy over the summer. Countless members, both officers and civilian employees, worked tirelessly to make both the Calgary Stampede and the World Petroleum Congress safe and successful. Officers also responded to the violent and chaotic political conflict in Falconridge that shocked our community. Despite the service's best efforts to engage the Eritrean community and prepare for the conflict in advance, officers still ended up in a volatile situation that they managed to bring back under control quickly. Investigators are still working hard to identify and hold those responsible for the violence and destruction of property accountable, and we now need the community to support them in this work. On behalf of our commission and all Calgarians, I want to thank all the members of the service who worked on these things over the summer. These are just a few highlights of the great work done every day by members, and we are grateful for your dedication to our community. With that, I will conclude my chair's report, and we will now move on to our first presentation from the Calgary Police Service. Calgary recently hosted the World Petroleum Congress, and our commission requested a quick overview of how policing went during the event. As the event only finished a few days ago, we know this report will be fairly high level, but we're still looking forward to hearing it. Acting Chief Tawfik, please go ahead with your first presentation.
Thanks very much, Chair Cornett. And before I get into that, I just want to thank you for the comments, the positive feedback on all the work of our members throughout the summer. And it has been busy, but our members continue to be passionate about making a difference in the communities every day. We also recognize the tragic loss of Constable O'Brien from the RCMP in Coquitlam, and we will be sending representation at the regimental funeral. And today, that rings very, very true to us with the sentencing hearing this morning for Sergeant Andrew Harnett's death and the youth that was tried as an adult there. So we know nothing will take that away from our members, but it's good to see that coming to conclusion, and so that we can move on. The Alberta Police and Peace Officer Memorial Day this past weekend, it was emphasized there, and our members were there to support that as well. And we thank you for the CPC Policing Summit, where we got a great opportunity to connect with community. I really appreciate your acknowledgement of our members' work recently. With the number of homicides we've had, it has been busy. Added to that is the World Petroleum Congress, which you mentioned, and I have Acting Superintendent Sheldon Scott here, who was the incident commander for that whole operation. This was really about a 1.5 to 2 year plan to be implemented locally, where Calgary was put on the international stage in the oil and gas industry. So I'll turn it over to Acting Superintendent Sheldon Scott, who will go over some of the highlights. It will be a verbal report at this point. We are, of course, given that it just completed last Thursday afternoon, in the process of completing several after actions and administrative tasks. So I'll turn it over to Sheldon to go through some of the highlights.
Thank you, Chief. Just first, I want to acknowledge the Chair, the Police Commission members, members of the Calgary Police Service, ELT, and our guests here today and the guests online before I start the presentation. I was fortunate enough to be involved in this. Like the Deputy mentioned, it's been approximately 1.5 to 2 years in planning and preparation for the city to host this. I'd be remiss without mentioning that back in 2000, Calgary hosted this, and then again in September of 2023. We were the only city to be fortunate enough to host the World Petroleum Congress twice. And I'd like to, again, acknowledge the people that were involved in it to make it successful, to be able to bring a venue like that to the city and to really showcase to the rest of the world what Calgary and what our business partners can do to host an event like that and make it successful. I'll just quickly go over some highlights. There will be a after action report. We're still in the demobilization phase, so there will be more detailed information coming once we're done all our documents and be able to come back to you with what our findings are and what our strengths and weaknesses were throughout the event and how we can improve on what we've seen from this past September. Overall, again, a reminder of what our operational plan started with. It was our mission. It was to maintain order, peace, public safety, and to protect life and property, while respecting the lawful rights related to freedom of expression and assembly under the Charter of Rights and Freedom of all involved, including an ongoing assessment of community impact. With that, we focused on probably the key areas were going to be event action plan, which consisted of our venues. The first venue was the hospitality opening ceremony at the convention center. And then secondly, we're going to transition over to the Stampede grounds for the actual Congress itself for the event. We added on to being in our preparation to what we would add to that is what would be a mass arrest plan. We have seen throughout the world that these events can be very challenging. We had to be able to scale up and be able to respond to adapt to what was occurring in our city and to ensure we have critical infrastructure protected, again, people and property. So we had a mass arrest plan in place, and unfortunately we didn't have to activate that. We're also in a big communication plans process with our businessing partners through the city, through commission itself and through other communication people that we liaise on throughout the week. The highlight of the two kind of how we assisted this is we set up 2 logistical areas to be able to police different sides of the venue, so we wouldn't continue to be able to have challenges in responding to it. We set up two areas to stage our resources, and the resources were half were at the actual Stampede grounds, the other half were up at the Pump House Theater in a city lot that was fortunate to be provided to us that we set up a staging area in. That's again allowed us to be able to adapt and respond to various situations in event that we were going to have to deploy, that we wouldn't have all resources in one particular area. The other part of the success in the program, I would have to give compliments to our local police liaison roles. We had that. We had police liaison team that would go out and speak to members of the community. If there was people out in those groups or there's messaging that they were going to be out, we sent out representation to be able to liaise with them and ask them what their plans would be, but also to ensure that they knew what would be accepted and be lawful at that type of venue. And then we had a local police liaison program that was created to deal with our higher level internationally protected persons that may arrive or delegates, and we assigned members of the Calgary Police Service to them to be able to liaise in movements that we had with various them at different times. The EOC was activated. Again, very fortunate to have the assistance of, again, a major contributing partner of the Calgary Police Service. They activated. We did have our EOC activated in our police building, like the deputy mentioned. We were up and running Sunday through the event with a shifting coverage for day and night to be able to adapt that was coming in. I just want to take a minute to really acknowledge and pay respects to the mutual aid agencies that assisted us. We could not and would not be successful without them today. To be able to police a city of this size with what we're seeing with the call load, we have to look at external resources to be able to come to assist us. And we had our chief go to the Alberta Association of Chiefs of Police, present a proposal to look at mutual aid agreements that were able to draw other law enforcement agencies in to assist us. So we didn't draw just Calgary resources from Calgary. So the members that came in assisted were the RCMP, Vancouver Police Department Mounted Unit, the Edmonton Police Service, Lethbridge Police Service, Medicine Hat Police Service, Satina National Police Service, Calgary Transit, bylaw peace officers, the Calgary Fire Department, Calgary 911, Calgary Emergency Management Agency, and Alberta Health Services. Partially the success due to this was, it was probably one of the only times we implemented a vacation training block throughout the Calgary Police Service. So we were sure to have our resources in the city and if need be to be able to scale up. We did follow suit from a lot of inquiries from different events being hosted, and we identified 2 areas that we identified as dedicated demonstration zones. There's a lot of discussions about if people were to go somewhere, where could they gather? We weren't just dictating where they could go, but what would be a safe environment for them to gather. And a lot of times in venues like this, people gather on a street corner. People are driving by and they're exposed to risk. People may not be intentionally trying to hit them or strike them, but they're distracted by noises and crowd size, and people have been injured those in the past. So we designated Olympic Plaza across from City Hall as one area because with the inquiries that we looked at and the recommendations, they want to be in view of the venue itself. So that would give a view of the actual convention center where people be coming and going from. And the second was Reader Rock Garden, south of the Stampede for the actual venue itself. So people would be in view of that and be able to, again, have that designated area that they could demonstrate it if they need be. I can report that until the event is done, we know that we should be within budget. We built in a contingency. We should be on par with our budget to what we deployed with. And there will be, like I said, an after-action report and lessons learned shared with the Commission once we have all the information compiled.
Great. Thank you very much for that report. And I just, a couple of things that popped into my mind as you were speaking, and then we'll go to questions. The communications were excellent, both before the conference and during the conference. So I just want to thank you for that. It's, at all levels with businesses, communities, and all, it was amazing. I don't know if people heard it, but the vacation block, I think we just need to recognize that it's the whole service. It's not just the people who are there at the event. It's the whole service who knew a year in advance that they would not be getting vacation in September. And so I think that that's just a credit to the whole service for banding together. And then the amount of research that went, I know people were in Houston and all over the place in the year prior to learn from best examples and what other people have experienced. So just a lot of credit. I heard one person say at a different place saying, boy, I didn't even hardly know what was going on. And that's a good thing with these things, Didn't work in the oil and gas industry and said, I didn't even know what was going on. So thank you so much to the whole service and all of the work you did at the engagement and communication and research. And with that, I'll turn it over to commission members to ask if there are any questions. This is amazing. You've done great. Not this time. And we'll look forward to your after action report. I think there may be some lessons learned, but you certainly learned from lessons prior to this. So thank you very much, and we appreciate the update and look forward to more.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, Sheldon, for the presentation, and we will bring forward more detailed information once it's finalized. I can say it was a great team effort across the organization. Every role in the ICS or incident command structure was filled by different people at different levels, and it was all hands on deck. So truly a team effort, and we appreciate it. It has put Calgary on the spotlight or in the spotlight for future events like this. So it places us well, and all the planning that went into it, we have retained. So we can apply that moving forward. It will make it much easier in the future. Next, we'll move on to the PSS annual report, and I'll turn it over to Executive Director Murphy for that.
PSS stands for Professional Standards Section Annual Report. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Good afternoon. I'm pleased to be here today to talk to you about professional standards, and in particular, our 2022 annual report. My name is Catherine Murphy. I'm the Executive Director of Legal and Regulatory Services with CPS. I'm joined today by Sandra Jacoby, who is our Director of PSS Business Operations, and Staff Sergeant Del Vella, who is a Staff Sergeant in Professional Standards on our investigative side of the house. I know I've got about 10 minutes, so I'll move through the presentation if we could pull that up pretty efficiently, and then there'll be time for some questions. We can go to the next slide, thanks. Okay, so I'm going to focus on the annual report, but I'm going to situate my comments in the context of our structure and professional standards, our mandate, what our priorities are currently, and then of course I'll talk about our business results. Hopefully this will give you a better sense of who we are, what we do, and how we do it in PSS. So this is on the screen is our professional standards organizational structure. I'm sharing this with you because I think something a lot of people don't realize is that PSS is actually half civilian and half sworn. So we're about an even balance of makeup in professional standards. We recently reorganized professional standards by introducing a business operations section. And the purpose of this was really to improve business continuity in the section and to have better oversight, and this is civilian oversight, of processes, business planning, training, reporting, and really just monitoring to make sure that we are not missing anything and that our files are progressing efficiently through the process. Another interesting feature on the in our organization chart is our quality assurance team. So this is, you can see it here, it's an entirely civilian team that was built a couple of years ago, and its mandate is exactly what it would suggest, quality assurance. So they play a very horizontal role in the section, and they are paired with our investigators, so they're embedded throughout the process to make sure that we are sticking to our timelines, we're moving files along, we don't miss anything in those files, and that our decisions are well-reasoned and consistent. We also have introduced civilian investigators into professional standards. About a third of our investigators are civilians, and they have backgrounds in things like law, policing. We even have a former justice of the peace working in our section, and they work with detectives on the investigative side of our house. And that initiative has been hugely successful for the section. So the professional standards mandate, I mean, most people realize, obviously, we intake and we investigate complaints that come in from the public about their interactions with police officers. We also intake compliments from members of the public about our police officers, and typically we get about the same amount of compliments as we do complaints in any given year. We alert the provincial director of law enforcement when there's been a serious injury or death that may have been caused by a police interaction, or for other sensitive files that come across our desk. We report regularly on trends and disciplinary statistics, and we are overseen by the CPC's Complaints Oversight Committee, who we meet with 8 times a year, as well as regular and more detailed involvement by the Commission's Public Complaints Director, who has access to all our files, audits those files, and sits in regularly on our section meetings about individual investigations. So over the past several years, professional standards has been undergoing a fairly aggressive transformation. It's focused on significant civilianization of key positions, including my own in PSS. We've been focusing on ensuring solid, objective, and robust processes. It includes the creation of the quality assurance team I spoke about. Our current priorities are on the screen. We're really focused on enhancing accessibility through technology. We recently launched a new public portal for the filing of complaints, which is much easier and complements, I should note, off of our website. We're focused on restorative outcomes, so alternative dispute resolution and informal mediation of complaints. We are focused on education and engagement, both internally to CPS and externally to sort of demystify the disciplinary process. We know it's not well understood, and we're working hard on sharing that information with both our members and members of the public. And then last but certainly not least, we're working hard to promote equity, diversity, and inclusion in our section and in our work, and contributing to CPS's anti-racism action plan. And that includes things like leveraging body-worn camera as an accountability mechanism, which I'll speak to, as well as ensuring that our investigators are adequately trained on best practices in investigating allegations of discrimination and racism, for example. So turning to the numbers, to put this in context, in 2022, CPS responded to about 500,000 calls for service. Over and above that, we have lots of other interactions with citizens, including, for example, in schools, in casual meetings, as they're working in other contexts. About 0.06% of those interactions result in a complaint to professional standards. Last year, we saw a fairly drastic decrease in the number of contacts and complaints to professional standards from members of the public. Contacts are just what they sound like. It's a concern that comes in through a phone call, through email, or through our public portal. It may or may not turn into a complaint, often not. And those were down 19% year over year in 2022. The number of complaints were down about 14% year over year, and that's actually much more consistent now with the 5-year average. So we saw a bit of a spike, and then now it's back down in 2022 quite significantly. We are seeing a similar trend in 2023. So the total number of contacts and complaints is holding steady this year, with a bit of an interesting variation in that the number of contacts is up, but the number of complaints is down. So we're still analyzing what that means, but overall, the total amount of things that we're intaking of files is remaining steady year over year. Speaking to efficiency, we obviously don't control the total number of contacts that come into PSS, but one thing we do control is how we process those complaints and contacts. So you can see on this slide that we have materially decreased our open files in PSS. So we started the year in 2022 around 350 open files, and today we're sitting around 150 as of last month. So we've seen a 20% decrease in the time to close complaints over the 5-year average. We're now closing more than half of complaints within a year, and about 20% are getting closed within 6 months. It's important to note that about a quarter of our open files are with external agencies for investigation. So whether that's ACERT or another police agency, that accounts for about 25% of our current 150 file load. So turning to body-worn camera, I mentioned this previously, but body-worn camera has been, I would say, an absolute game changer for professional standards. I think it is an incredible accountability tool in terms of deterring misconduct and being able to see it if it does happen, obviously. It's also a very important safety tool for our officers while they're working. But for professional standards, it provides objective evidence. And if there's multiple officers on a scene from multiple different angles, the video quality is very good. So what this does is when we have a situation where there may be no third-party witnesses, we have the body-worn camera. We're not put in a situation where we have to determine who to believe, right? If you're in sort of a he said type situation, the body-worn camera removes that problem, and it removes and helps deal with the perception of bias in the process. So it's extremely helpful from a professional standards perspective. It's also allowed us, for the files in which body-worn camera are available, to close them on average 2 months faster than a file that does not have body-worn camera available. So it's very efficient as well. This year in our annual report, we have increased the amount of information we're sharing about penalty and complaint disciplinary outcomes. We know that there's a desire to have this information on the part of Calgarians, and while we're not able to share individual officer discipline due to privacy legislation and because those are employment records, we're trying to put out more statistics and more aggregate information so that Calgarians can understand what our complaint outcomes look like. So you can see on this slide that 13% of complaints in 2022 resulted in formal discipline for our officers. Almost half were resolved informally, and that could be through supervisor intervention, through formal mediation, or through a facilitated discussion with our intake team. And then the remainder were either not sustained, which means we found no misconduct, and that's about 30%. Dismissed, and dismiss means, for example, the time limit for filing complaints had run out, so there's no standing to make a complaint, or it was withdrawn by the complainant. The most common forms of misconduct, both serious and less serious, is insubordination. And that is a police term for non-compliance to an order or a policy. By far, that's the most common, followed by discreditable conduct, which is another term which basically means conduct that negatively impacts the reputation and trust in the service. We do see use of force at about 9% and neglect of duty at about 14%. The most common penalty for our officers for misconduct was an official warning at about 50%. We also levy penalties that are financial in nature, and that means that we take away overtime hours from their pay bank, or we suspend them without pay, or they are demoted, or in the most extreme cases, dismissed from the service. I wanted to end the presentation on a positive note. I spend most of my day in PSS reviewing officer conduct, obviously, reviewing video of police interactions, reviewing complaints, and we also review compliments. And I can tell you that spending all day looking at body-worn camera and observing police conduct, it is a very, very, very difficult job. It's a job that requires not just police tactics, but it requires emotional intelligence. It requires communication, it requires engagement, de-escalation. So our officers are really required, while their literal lives are on the line, to bring all these skill sets to bear in their interactions. And we receive hundreds of compliments every year that demonstrate how our officers do that. And what's interesting about the compliments is they're not typically about police tactics. It's not typically about how complaints or calls for service are resolved. It's about how our officers make people feel, right? So when they show up and they treat people with empathy, with kindness, they connect with them, they educate and they engage, that's what generates the vast majority of our compliments from citizens. So there's probably no better way to make my point than to just read you an example of a compliment. I think you'll understand what I'm saying. I have the permission of the lady who filed the compliment to read this, as well as the constable who received it. Although in typical unselfish fashion, he asked that his name not be used because he doesn't want any public recognition for his work. So this compliment actually stemmed from a quite sad case of a woman who made a police complaint on behalf of her mother, who was in a long-term care home with dementia. And she had her gold necklace, which her husband gave to her many years ago, stolen right off of her person in the long-term care home. So she obviously reported this to police, and the result of that investigation led to this compliment. Constable H is the investigator for my online police report for the theft of my mother's gold necklace. My mom is in long-term care, is very elderly, blind, has dementia, and in a wheelchair. Constable has, I just used his name. I'm sorry. Constable H has been keeping me informed of the progress of the investigation. He's very compassionate and empathetic in regard to what has happened with my mom's gold chain that my dad, now deceased, bought her many years ago. She's never taken it off her neck since she got it. Constable H and I met this week to discuss the case. In conversation, he told me that his wife was sorting through some of her jewelry as they're downsizing, and he brought 2 gold chains from his wife for my mom in the hope that they would bring her some comfort, as both he and his wife have been through dementia with their elderly parents. I was so touched by this gesture of kindness and caring from Constable H and his wife. When I took the necklace to my mom and put it on her, she was comforted as she knows her necklace was taken in October. Constable H is a very kind soul and an officer who truly cares about the community. In gratitude, the complimenter. So this is the kind of thing that we see every day, and it is very touching in terms of our officers just going above and beyond in their kindness to citizens on a daily basis. So with that, I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you, and thank you for finishing with that compliment. That's got a few tears, I think, in the eyes. I'll turn it over to Commission for questions. Commissioner Campbell.
Thanks very much, Chair. Slide over here. Thanks very much, Edie Murphy. You mentioned investigators are being trained to investigate cases of racial discrimination or racial harassment. Can you expand a little bit on that to outline or provide some context to that approach?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So we're building this training really from the ground up. It's not really something that exists off the shelf. So the training will start in the fall, and it will have several parts. There will be a legal element to it so that our officers and our civilian investigators understand legal requirements around human rights, legislation, around things like the law around racial profiling, those types of things. And then we're having an expert in human resource investigations who have worked with police come in to provide training on best practices for these investigations, including a trauma-informed approach, how to identify and mitigate bias, unconscious bias in investigations. And then we're also going to include a session with our community mobilizers so that our team can get a community perspective on what it is like and some of the challenges and barriers that people face in filing complaints with professional standards for these types of allegations.
Thanks so much.
Thank you. Commissioner Dyson-Jordan.
This one. Thank you. Sorry. Edie Murphy, I noticed somewhere in the presentation or in the report, some discussion about the journey mapping that you did related to this, as well as involving the Employee Advisory Committee. Can you tell me whether your improved efficiency and the outcomes and the dramatic drop in numbers and the speed of which you are actually getting through those concerns, has that been communicated to the rank and file, through the advisory committee, or do people know? Because I know that this is a huge issue with police officers, that you sit with a complaint for 2 years and it's a challenge. So what's been communicated?
Absolutely. This report and the progress has been communicated broadly internally. I've done a number of engagements myself, and my team is out regularly working on the recommendations. And for those that aren't aware, the journey mapping work was work undertaken in PSS with our membership to better understand the impacts on our members of the complaints process. So regardless of outcome, obviously the process has, in some cases, quite a severe mental health impact on our members. We have a suite of recommendations that came from that work. One is better coordination with our psych services and wellness and culture division to support our members. We're putting out a lot more training and information to our members on how the disciplinary process works and how to get information about where their file might be at, just from a process perspective. We've also implemented some consistency and some communication around potential disciplinary penalties so that when officers are charged with a certain type of misconduct, they have a sense of what they might be looking at in terms of a disciplinary result. And lastly, we've put in place, I shouldn't say lastly, there's a number of other things, but from a high level, we've put in place a member liaison role. So this is a sergeant in the division whose sole job is to serve as a process support, a process liaison for our employees, and to train employees with a focus on leadership so that the process is better understood. And again, I want to emphasize that our focus on member wellness and process supports in no way takes away from the strength of the accountability process. So they're not mutually exclusive. We have a very robust, objective process, and we take the steps we need to take. But it's just important that we're cognizant of some of the stressors that applies on our employees as they make their way through that process and mitigate those as best we can.
So to follow up, just so I am aware of, you've done tremendous amount of work related to this. Does the employee advisory committee take that back to the rank and file? And what feedback have you received from
Very positive feedback. We take it out personally from PSS and share it. The Employee Advisory Committee is a committee that's made up of leadership representation from professional standards, human resources, respect and inclusion, psych services, and legal services. And really the purpose of that committee is to look at more complex cases and ensure that we have complaints in the right forum and that they're being treated the right way with the right process. So that's kind of what that committee's purpose is. But in terms of the communication, we've been with the help of strategic communications quite deliberate in the last 6 months in sharing the progress and in sharing the work that we're doing to address the journey mapping feedback.
Okay, thank you. I have Commissioner North Pagan, and then Commissioner Siddiqui and Rosell, and Kim Lynch Proctor afterwards. So Commissioner North Pagan, who is online today.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Edie Murphy, for the presentation. I was here since 2017 and seen the pieces come together, and there's quite a tremendous amount of balls in the air when we talk about the history and putting together of this system. My question goes back to the body-worn cameras, and I know that it's important that we bring up the fact that this was actually a direct call to action from the community after the missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls report came out. And with that being said, there have been some challenges along the way. One of them has been, and this is across the board, is it takes time and it takes manpower to actually sit down and to go through those tremendous amount of footage and tapes relating to a specific case. I'm just curious to know how CPS is tackling this challenge.
Well, maybe I'll start and then I'll turn to the executive in case they wish to ask. From a professional standards perspective, and I also oversee the access to information area. So obviously, I can speak from my own experience that you are correct. The resource requirements to process what can sometimes be hundreds of hours of video, sometimes redacting, disclosing to the public, it's extremely labor intensive and extremely resource intensive. I would add, however, that from my perspective where I sit, it's entirely worth it. So it's really just about making sure we have the right amount of resources, but the upside and the benefits, both for our officers and members of the public, is extraordinary. I actually have joined CPS about 1.5 years ago, so I've never done this role without body-worn camera. And I can't imagine doing it without body-worn camera because it is such a useful tool that we rely on so much, and it really takes the subjectivity out of the equation and really allows us to focus in. It's also a great tool for informal dispute resolution because sometimes people perceive an event and maybe it didn't actually happen that way, but often events are emotionally charged. They can be traumatic, they can be chaotic. And so the video provides a sort of objective lens on the event after the fact that is incredibly useful to us in a multitude of ways, but I'll turn it to the executive.
Thanks very much. And I totally concur, to do this without body-worn camera now would be stepping way back. And I can tell you at the provincial level with the Ministry of Public Safety, there's a strong emphasis on all agencies moving in this direction. We're ahead of the game, fortunately, and you can see the contributing results in the data that has been presented.
You want me to add some?
Thank you. Did you want to add something?
Yeah, through the
Gigi?
chair,
Yeah.
if you don't mind. So thanks, Commissioner Northby, again, for your questions and your comments. So Executive Director Murphy has captured it accurately. I think you've heard me talk about this before. Some of you might recall that we actually rolled out the first pilot of the body-worn cameras back in 2002 or 2008 or 2009. And back then we underestimated the back end support. And so that has only grown. So in addition to what the chief has said and what Catherine has said, we're working closely with the Crown Prosecutor's Office as well. We've got many, many people in the body-worn camera area that comes under my portfolio that are working hard to support this. And as Catherine has said, many members, and I think you've heard me talk about the culture before, when we first rolled these out, they were, this isn't going to work, this is additional Big Brother. And now many of our members will not go out on the street without a body-worn camera. So that's how much we've come forward, and how much the culture has changed, and how much our officers want that additional transparency. So we're working hard, as you've heard, with many of our partners and many of our resources to address that, because it's far too important for us to step away from this.
Thank you. Commissioner Siddiqui.
Thank you for your report and the story at the end. Such kindness on part of the officer and his wife. So that's incredible to see. I have a question regarding, you've had many successes over, I would say, the last couple of years from what I've seen during my time on commission. Is there one or two things that you would attribute that have helped you with the complaints coming down? Because your percentages are going down in terms of reduction. Would you say that there's one or two key things that you've implemented over the last couple of years that have helped that?
Well, I'll start by saying I actually think it's the team and professional standards is the biggest factor. There's a huge commitment there to improve things both for members of the public and for our officers themselves. The Arkansas inquiry came out several years ago, and that really lit a fire to improve the way that we do things. And I've seen exceptional leadership by my team in professional standards to really think outside the box and come up with some creative process improvements. We still have a long way to go to improve the process. Tactically, body-worn camera is huge. The quality assurance team is huge. And improving our business continuity is also a big factor. So what works in PSS is not, we have a good mix of civilian and sworn members. So it's the balance when we review files of having a sworn perspective, because they're trained police officers, so they understand police tactics and training. And we also have a large contingent of civilian members that provide a different perspective. And we make recommendations and professional standards based on consensus. So it's not one person other than the chief deciding the outcome of a file. We will work it with multiple people and the entire management team to ensure that we're comfortable with where it's ending up and that it's an objective and a balanced outcome. So I think those are really kind of the magic recipe in the sauce, but I really would come back to, I think it's just leadership in there and creative thinking on the part of the management team and PSS.
Thank you. Commissioner Rosell, and then Commissioner Lynch-Proctor.
Actually, my question got answered. So I just want to say that over the last 3.5 years, the progress here is just, it's been amazing. Like it just all overall, it's been absolutely fantastic. Thank you.
Agreed. Thanks very much. And Commissioner Lynch-Proctor.
Yeah, I would echo that, and most of my questions have been asked already, but I do have a couple, and I just wanted to commend you on and the whole team on the progress that's been made in the past few years. It's such a key role that you play to drive public trust and confidence through accountability and transparency. And I just can't underscore how significant the improvements have been. And it's evident in the statistics that you shared with us today. So well done to your whole team. Just had a couple remaining questions that I think might be of interest. You have been live with a new public portal now for a number of months. And so sorry, this is really far away from me. My question is, what has been the reaction to the new public portal? How do you think it's being received by the public? And how has it helped to drive greater accessibility in filing complaints?
The reaction has actually been fairly neutral, which I take as a positive sign. So we have not had any material complaints about the public portal, and it actually went extremely smoothly in terms of the launch. So anytime you launch a new IT system, it's a little bit scary. And given the volume that we handle, whether that goes smoothly and whether there's any glitches in that is always a concern. But this was very smooth. One of the benefits of the public portal is that it updates complainants every 45 days automatically. So that has actually reduced and made it more efficient from an administrative perspective internally, but it's also more reliable for complainants and gets pushed out, like I said, automatically based on the live current status of their file that's in the system. So the systems speak to each other from the back end, and I found that that's been one of the key positives of that.
Thank you. And just one more. One of your priorities that you mentioned at the outset was improving restorative outcomes and access to alternative dispute resolution. Can you just elaborate on how you are, what sort of measures you're using in order to focus on that priority?
Yeah, we have added a key performance indicator. It's in the annual policing plan and will be again next year on the percentage of complaints that are closed through ADR or alternative dispute resolution. Right now, in 2022 and consistent in 2023, we're at about 45% of complaints resolved that way. But if you look at it from a contacts and complaints, so everyone that calls with a concern, we're looking at more than 90% are resolved at intake, which means they're resolved informally. So the intake team in PSS is actually a group of extremely skilled informal dispute resolution folks. They just don't have that officially in their title, but they spend a lot of time with people explaining police processes, explaining police training, police policies, working with supervisors to intervene with their staff. So actually, less than 200 files actually get transferred into formal investigation every year. We work very hard to resolve them informally at the outset. That said, if we have a file that, for example, includes an allegation of excessive use of force or something serious of that nature, we always investigate those regardless of whether the complainant sort of asks or insists that we proceed. We ensure that complaints of a certain nature, they do move forward and they're thoroughly looked at in the investigation stage.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you again for the report and the tremendous work done over the last couple of years, so much appreciated. And we can move on to section 5.3, crime tents.
Thanks very much, Chair, and thanks to Catherine and the team for the PSS work. It's outstanding. I'll start with the Bureau of Investigative Support first. So Acting Deputy Chief Ryan Aliff will go first, and then we'll transition to the Bureau of Community Policing, and I'll cover off that one just because I've had continuity of the reporting, and we'll go from there.
Thank you, Chief. I appreciate the opportunity to fill in for Deputy Cook while he is away. I'll start with gun violence and organized crime. So I say carefully here, as of this morning, since I know this afternoon we've had at least one shooting in the city. There were 76 shootings in Calgary, which is a 28% decrease from the same period in 2022. Of these shootings, 18% have a confirmed connection to organized crime in Calgary. Since our last report to the CPC, we have concluded several significant investigations relating to gun violence and organized crime, including these highlights. In August of 2023, our Organized Crime Operations Unit concluded a 5-month investigation that resulted in the seizure of 7 unlawfully possessed firearms and more than 1.5 kilograms of drugs. 5 search warrants were executed at residences in Calgary as part of this investigation. 2 men are now facing charges, including 31 firearms charges for one of the accused. This individual was previously the subject of a firearms prohibition by the courts. And despite our investigators working collaboratively with the Crown to demonstrate his risk to public safety, he was released on bail just days following his arrest. Throughout the summer, our violent crime suppression team prioritized proactive enforcement of individuals with a history of violence and known connections to organized crime. Through this work in July of 2023, 5 men were arrested in 2 separate incidents after being found to be in possession of loaded firearms while out in busy downtown areas, including inside a restaurant and outside of a festival. 4 handguns were seized during these arrests. At the end of June 2023, our firearms investigative team seized 14 firearms after investigating an offender who was on probation and had his firearms license revoked. The investigation revealed that the accused was in unauthorized possession of firearms and ammunition and was acting in contravention of the Firearms Act. He has since been charged with 6 more firearms-related offenses. At the beginning of September, our firearms investigative unit co-hosted a one-day conference focused on crime gun investigations. The session brought together law enforcement partners from Canada and the United States with the goal of increasing information sharing and collaboration between agencies. Due to the cross-jurisdictional nature of gun crime, our ability to work together with law enforcement partners is essential to keeping Calgarians safe. I'll move into homicides. So I know, Chair, you said as the report we gave you at 16, but as of the 25th of September, we were up to 17 homicides for the year, with the latest occurring on the 24th in Pine Ridge. Our clearance rate is now at 59%. For the cases that have not been cleared this year, all were caused by a firearm. Additionally, all of these fatal shootings were targeted, meaning that there was likely an element of pre-planning and an attempt by offenders to destroy evidence. All of these incidents remain active investigations. Historically, and I've said this before at this meeting, fatal shootings can be more difficult to solve as there is often a greater distance between the victim and the offender during the incident, leading to less physical evidence being left at the scene. Most of our 2023 homicides, approximately 75%, have occurred in public spaces such as parks, roadways, or parking lots. In 50%, or approximately a little over 50% of these public setting homicides, we have already laid charges. This is a concerning trend that we are continuing to monitor. Whether these incidents are targeted or not, these brazen displays of violence have a significant impact on our citizens' sense of safety. Where possible, we use intelligence to target known offenders so that we can prevent and suppress planned incidents of violence. We also work to make sure that our resources are well placed across the city to respond quickly when these incidents occur. I want to move into a sexual assault prevention. So online dating sites and apps are an increasingly popular way for individuals to meet each other, but the nature of the platforms and the dates themselves can leave people susceptible to potential dangers. So by educating Calgarians, we can help mitigate the risks of online dating. So in September of 2023, we launched a public education campaign via social media to help Calgarians protect themselves while online dating. Cybercrime. We've seen a significant increase in the dollar loss of our crypto victims in Calgary. In all of 2022, Calgarians lost just shy of $14 million in fraud scams related to cryptocurrency. So far in 2023, Calgarians have already lost just over $19 million. This is primarily through investment scams as well as smaller amounts of romance and employment scams. Earlier this month, our blockchain investigation team continued our crypto training through our partnership with Chainalysis. Investigators receiving this training will be able to directly respond to the increase in victimization that we are seeing with the cybercrime trends. So if I was going to explain the increase, it is through this partnership that our officers now have a tool that allows them to engage the public a bit more. I know I've said at previous meetings that we were saying we couldn't help people when they had crypto scams. Now we have the ability to help, so it's an increase in reporting that's leading to the increase in the total scam. And I want to end on something positive. I came to this meeting before. I know my boss, it's usually every year at this meeting and the one after that I fill in just because that's how his holidays fall. So I came to this group and I talked about some very serious pharmacy robberies and cannabis store robberies. I showed video in closed session that I know was impactful. And so I just wanted to say that there were no pharmacy robberies in August and only 3 year to date. So noticeably last year we had over 60 at this time. Okay. That was because of that collaborative effort. We talked about Operation Remedy. And so we talked about what we were going to do, which was a collaboration between all areas of our service. So that was engaging the families at the front end, talking with our investigators that were monitoring the offenders, and then on the far end, enforcement and work with the Crown. To further that, we've only had one cannabis store robbery in 2023, none in August, and this time last year, we're sitting at 21 year to date. So that approach, in that sense, has made an impact in Calgary in that space. On top of all that, I should mention this, we liaise closely with our provincial partners, and through CEPTED work, we were able to change how these pharmacies were laid out for the safety of their employees. And that concludes my report.
Thanks, Ryan. So we'll shift right into the Bureau of Community Policing update. And the commission will have noticed that the report for this month is quite different than what had come previously. So we were trying to present in a little different way. I won't rehash the entire introductory report, but just as some context, typically when we do crime statistic reporting, we follow the Uniform Crime Reporting Standards, which is StatsCan requirements, which in those cases focuses on the most serious violations. So if you have a call that has a break and enter, an assault, and a mischief all in one, and those are all three different codes, it would be categorized as the most serious, which would be the assault. So for the purposes of these reports and to give better visibility into what's happening everywhere, we're including all violations. So you'll get, it's the total picture of all violations that we're presenting as part of our crime update there. So it's really a 2-page snapshot, public safety snapshot. We've included things such as the officer generated and public generated calls for service trending with a total in the middle. We have the top 3 generated officer generated calls. Of course, you have traffic stops as number 1. I would hope that would be the case. Suspicious person and theft under as the next 2. The ones generated by the public, disturbance, miscellaneous, which is a variety of call event types, and collisions. From a disorder perspective, and it's currently broken down into physical disorder and social disorder, we have the larger volume is a social disorder that has a lot more event types in it. Physical disorder is really things like damage to property, mischief, those types of things, and abandoned auto is in there as well. We'll be looking at that in the future. But social disorders, a lot of the ones that you would see that are probably the ones that cause a lot of community impact that we want to pay very close attention to. So we're seeing a slight decrease compared to the 5-year average on that front, which we know that's reported and perception may not be reality, but that's what we're seeing. As far as the criminal code violations, you'll see the trend lines across a number of categories, and we put these ones in here specifically. We can bring forward stats on domestic crimes separately, which we would do quarterly anyways. But for this one, it's the ones that we would typically see in public spaces. So assaults, assault with weapon, sexual offenses, robbery, commercial and street, and vehicle crime and break and enter. So to summarize the trending there, some concerns with respect to violent crime, assaults being a driving factor. I think 57% of the violent crime can be attributed to assaults. So that, of course, is something we are paying attention to. But on the positive side, we're seeing vehicle crime and break and enters, both residential and commercial, significant continued declines, despite COVID being long in our rearview mirror as far as a major impact that we anticipated. So that's interesting to watch as we move forward. We have the number of files cleared by charge, total charges laid, people charged, and weapons present in events. So things that we can track and we'll look at month by month. Are we seeing increases, decreases, those types of things? This is a citywide snapshot. So we will be producing this for District 1, specifically as a pilot, to see what does it look like in different districts across the city. And then we'll be looking to expand it to all districts and potentially providing this publicly. We have added the 5-year comparison so that you can see context over it year to year, and there would be some nuances to that as you'd reasonably expect, but it just gives you a little bit better visibility into things. And then you see the trend line on physical disorder and social disorder as well. So moving on, I know we'll get to questions in a minute, but we just wanted to focus on a few key things in the highlights, and you'll see this monthly. We'll bring forward different items for Commission's awareness. For this one, we have the District 1 Operation Encampment, and this, as mentioned by the Chair in the opening remarks, referenced District 1 work by our community resource officers leading the dismantling of a large encampment in Southeast Calgary. This had ties to a number of business break and enters in industrial areas. There was a large amount of property. We were very active pushing this out on social media as well, thanks to our StratComs folks. A lot of partner engagement in addressing this. And you can see in the articulation of the example there that we took great steps to provide notice, to give opportunity, to engage partners, to provide supports so that we can get people into the right places for them. As a result of this, it took a fair amount of time, but success as far as how we moved forward. I think this is probably one of the leading practices around how we deal with encampments as law enforcement agencies. These are controversial across Canada. We've seen this in other jurisdictions, but I think it's the way we approach it and the fact that we have adequate shelter space and things of that nature to provide supports that maybe some other jurisdictions don't have that contributes to our success. So we are following up with crime prevention through environmental design, the SEPTED approach to looking at these areas, how we can prevent them from recurring and becoming a repeat problem. So those are the things that we continue to look at. I give extreme credit to our members in District 1 and our partners who worked on this because they are not easy to deal with. And you're trying to help people sometimes at their most vulnerable times. The last two items, just briefly in there, we had a pre-World Petroleum Congress proactive downtown operation focused on trying to address some of the social disorder there. We had brought in district resources from across the city to focus on that, just to try to make sure it was as safe as we could make it for the Congress. And then the District 6 Community Engagement Response Team initiative, which was really focusing on C-train safety. Over a 2-day period, they did a number of drug enforcement operations, which led to the arrest of a number of offenders. And when we take that approach, looking at the offenders that are causing the most harm, we see the most success. So that's the highlight on that. I'll just add a couple things from just for interest to the Commission. The September 2nd conflict in Northeast Calgary that is very topical at this point in time. As you know, we responded operationally to a very extensive conflict there. Our members did an exceptional job to intervene in a very volatile situation. We did already go to the media, and as of last Thursday, the investigative task force was looking into that clash and released images of 16 people believed to be directly involved, and we were looking for additional information and posted them on the public website. This week, the task force is adding additional images for a total of 42 individuals that have been directly identified as contributing or participating. We believe both sides of the conflict are involved in that 42 individuals. Our investigative team, the task force, has taken hours to go through more than 700 separate videos and to the point around body-worn camera and the value, piecing together through body-worn camera and other video evidence that we have to tie the actions of offenders in that environment is very comprehensive, and it's things that other agencies don't have right now. So when you look at other jurisdictions that have encountered the similar type of conflict, I don't think they're as well placed as we would be to hold people accountable. The media release that we did last week did generate some additional leads. So thanks to the media and to the public for that support. We are looking for more as we've put that out. We continue to work closely with our diversity unit and the community leaders to enhance the relationships and build understanding around the why to all of this. And I can tell you that the community leaders that we've met with have been clear they don't condone this type of violence, and we're certainly thankful for their cooperation. This is not representative of the entire Eritrean community, but there are people within that probably will be held accountable for their actions. I'll move on to the last item, which is the Stampede update. I know I submitted the report, so I won't spend a lot of time on it, other than to say that the 2023 Stampede was a very successful event, second, I think, highest in history for attendance and population at the parade as well. We did provide the commission with the update on June 28th prior to it kicking off. So as a major event, just to let you know that we are following up with after actions, working with the Stampede to plan for 2024 so that we can make it even better. There were a number of high profile concerts that did make it operationally a bit more challenging this year, but our members stepped in very well to support that massive event. So after actions will follow on that as well. So I'll conclude there, and then we can move to questions across any of the topics for the crime reports.
Thank you very much. Lots of work. I'm going to go with Commissioner Siddiqui, Commissioner Rossell, Commissioner Campbell. Should be nice and Jordan.
I just wanted to thank Acting Deputy Chief Aliff. I don't have a question. I just wanted to give a couple of kudos. One is that Project Remedy. My pharmacy and pharmacist were hit, and that gentleman is still dealing with the trauma from that incident. So thank you for everything you've done so that this year is much better. And my second comment was around the online dating safety tips. I think my daughters were tired of me forwarding those every day, but they were very well done and very well done to the segment of the population that you were targeting. And so I appreciated those as well. So thank you.
You for those comments. Commissioner Rosell.
Thank you. I saw the comments and you commented as well about the kind of mini LRT cleanup, but obviously you have ongoing initiatives there. Could you just comment on kind of how you're feeling about that, like how you're feeling about LRT safety at this point in time?
Absolutely. Thanks very much for the question, Commissioner. We do more than just what was in here. We added this one just as an example of one. So there is a coordinated effort, and we do meet on a weekly basis with a joint management team involving leadership from transit, parks, and ourselves, et cetera, all stakeholders that would be involved in safety in public spaces. So that helps us prioritize where we need to be and where we need to put our resources, both on our side, on transit, and elsewhere. There is, I think it was probably put out on the city website today, the public safety transit strategy that will be going to council on Monday. So we are working very much in close partnership with our transit partners there. So more to come on that for sure, working very much in an integrated way.
Thank you. Commissioner Campbell?
Thanks very much, Chair. Appreciate the report, Acting Chief Tawfik, and compliments to Ms. Daku, who I know does the compilation of what was a significant amount of data. I also appreciate the clarification and understanding between UCR and MSV. So now I know that means Uniform Crime Survey. No, sorry, I got that wrong already. But either way, it's basically most serious violation versus, just one or all of them. Appreciate that. My question, thinking about StatsCan and some of these categories that are defined nationally, like social disorder. Social disorder is a fairly all-encompassing category. By the report, it includes disturbances, drugs, indecent acts, intoxicated persons, mental health concerns, noise complaints, party complaints, possible gunshots, speeder, suspicious person, suspicious vehicle, unwanted guests. That could be a lot of people, well, actually just one person doing a lot of different things. Is there an opportunity to work nationally, whether it's through the Association of Chiefs of Police or the various committees and councils on which you sit currently, to be able to provide some additional differentiation in that category? Because I'm not sure that having all of those disorders socially combined into one is the most effective for being able to actually address the concerns of the community.
Thanks for the question, Commissioner. And I do think there is opportunity there. Some of these definitions we put together and is based on CAD and how we classify event types. So I think there is opportunity there. In the quarterly reporting that we do, these are often broken out, so they're more individually based, so you can drill down. What we can do as well as for our reporting is provide commission with anything that might be an anomaly that we're seeing a trend outside of that, knowing that they're kind of grouped that way in major categories. But I think there is opportunity. And Katie, I'm not sure if you have anything further, similar perspective. I'd like it to be more clear as well.
Thanks. Commissioner Cherie Nyson-Jordan. Thank you.
Thanks. Two questions. One, actually, it's more of a comment. I would really love to sit here next year and hear the same report about the cybercrime as we've heard about pharmacy, because when I see that 14 million go to 20 million and knowing that the opportunities are there. And I guess from my perspective, given that seniors and the elderly population are often the targets, I would hope that in the next year we see some strategies, because social media doesn't work for that group, might be their kids, might be their grandkids, but we still have to get at that seniors component. So looking forward to that change. And the other, more of a question, the firearms investigation convention that you had that did some collaboration. Were there any aha moments? Is there anything that we can learn from the collaboration that our firearms investigation unit is not doing? I know we're kind of top of the pile, but is there any aha moments that we can actually move forward on and anticipate?
Thanks for the question. So I'll answer them in order. I'm excited to talk about cyber. Like, I would love to talk about cyber with you. I know that there's a couple things that we're doing that are ambitious, and I feel strongly that what we're doing and what we're starting to build is going to address not only that, but the entire spectrum, or build capacity into the future to address a number of things in the cyber realm. So I'd like to say I'd come back and say 0 for cyber like we did for Operation Remedy, but I think we'll make an impact, and we can discuss that further. The other question, the answer is yes. And the answer in itself was simple. So the inspector that I have that works in that area came back with a request to co-locate some of our partners from agencies in the US and some of our partners here in the province. You're right. We do have a model right now that I think is the envy of a lot of Alberta agencies, if not nationally. But there's a lot of things that we don't have that we have to ask for, and that we can shorten that lag time by having those agencies or those representatives co-located with us. And we're exploring those options now.
Thank you. Commissioner Lynch-Proctor.
Thanks, Chair. Just a quick question. I really like your public safety snapshot and appreciate that you're planning to pilot this throughout your districts. I think that over time we've received feedback that the community are looking for more sort of targeted information about what's going on in their own communities. So how do you see what kind of measures, tactics are you using to communicate more directly with individual communities?
Thanks for the question, Commissioner. We're starting with this citywide, and then I think, once we get that solid, there is an ability to push it out, whether it be by district and then break down to community level. There is that capability. It's data. It's just using the data to do that. Some agencies are going by the way of open data and putting it out publicly on their websites, which is good. You have to monitor the privacy impacts of that and look at offsetting addresses and things of that nature to protect people's privacy. As an example, if a sexual assault occurred at an exact address, we obviously wouldn't want that mapped necessarily. But if you offset it by 3 blocks or 5 blocks or whatever to know what's happening in a region, it can give people better visibility into what's really happening in their communities. And I think that's the direction we want to go. It's going to take a bit of time to move there, but that's sort of in our sights moving forward.
Yes. Thank you very much. Commissioner Tangate.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick question about the C-Train or LRT. Sounds like you guys have a plan. It's going to city, which would be great. Does that plan include health and Alberta Health Services, knowing that a lot of it also includes mental illness, but also the overdose heat maps include a lot of the same areas of the violence? And so just simply policing it may not be the only effective way of doing it. Although, for perceived safety, it may be great, but maybe for those individuals who are vulnerable, it may not be.
Thank you for the question, Commissioner. Yes, so one of the, I'll call it pillars of that strategy that Transit will be bringing forward does focus on the partnerships around mental health and addictions and all of those impacts that we know that is a driver of what we see. So policing and the enforcement side is not going to be the solution to everything. We know that. And I know the work that Deputy McClellan is doing in her bureau around diversion efforts and working with community partners to get people out of the system and provide the necessary support so that they don't become a chronic repeat user of services. With some of the work we did on transit, we saw that we started to track which people are we dealing with time and time again. They may not be the most high harm offenders, but they're repeat offenders that we come across, probably Transit does, probably Alberta Health Services does. So we found that there are over 2,000 individual people that we dealt with over a 6-month period. Out of those 2,000, about 200 were actually the ones involved in violent crime offenses. So that's a small subset of the broader collective that need that support. So it is a key aspect. So yes, long answer to probably what could have been a short one. We will be involving our partners.
Thank you. And I have one last question/comment. The work around the Stampede was really good, and some of the ideas in terms of how to make it better and safer. Cybercrime for sure, and looking forward to hearing more about that. And the other one is encampments and the way that we've managed, and just my experience here is we've dealt with encampments a couple of different times, and it seems like we're getting some practices that seem to be working. And I get my comment is not so much a question, but a request that these areas come back to commission so we can see how they're actually being leveraged going forward. And part of that is how do we then communicate that back to both City Council, all of the Calgarians that we represent, and also celebrate a little bit of the success so that the service also recognizes that the part that they're not a part of is actually doing some really good work that's being recognized. So there's lots of facets to that, but those 3 areas in particular, I think would have a huge impact and leverage, and the C-Train and Transit as well, the partnerships, those sorts of things. So just in terms of trying to keep that in mind, as far as I think we as commissioners would really like to see how that comes back and how you're leveraging it, but also how do we communicate and generate some positive outcomes from that as well. Thanks. So with that, we'll move on to the anti-racism update.
I'll pass it right
5.4.
on to Deputy McClellan.
Thanks, Chief. Good afternoon, Commission members. I see, Chair, that we're at time, but I've got a couple of really good updates, so I'd like to take time to go through them. Our Racial Equity Office continues to support the service with navigating through our action items with our anti-racism strategic roadmap. Current work underway for the month of September includes additional internal training and our work on the 2023 Anti-Racism Engagement Plan and the report that we will be bringing forward. This also includes our continued work in consultation with the external ARAC around the collection of race-based data. In November, we will be bringing a year in review, which we will share what we have learned, how we have moved forward, and how we will continue to move forward. Our Indigenous Relations team, together with our Indigenous community mobilizers, are honored to support September 30th, National Day for Truth and Reconciliation. This includes several planned events for this week, both within CPS and in partnership with the community. Our theme within the service will be embracing curiosity and developing insight around Indigenous people's relationship to the land. We will meet and greet members, host Indigenous-based movies with Bannock, and offer a smudge and blessing from a community cultural advisor. We have also been invited to stand up the Chief's Teepee at Heritage Park in honor of September 30th National Day for Truth and Reconciliation, and the competition for the second Indigenous Relations Team Constable position closed on September 19th, and yesterday we notified the successful candidate. With respect to our Diversity Resource Team, the month of September was equally busy for the Diversity Resource Team and our community mobilizers, including ongoing collaboration with the city to address the public safety and social disorder concerns at Olympic Plaza, some of which you've heard, supports for the Eritrean community with respect to the recent violence within our city, and collective plans with community partners to mitigate any further risk to public safety for all communities. Other events to highlight for the month of September are the celebration of Pride Week, including a community safety survey completed by 428 participants, and the work with our communities and of course in the WPC. With respect to our community mobilizers, we are approaching 6 months as they're members of the CPS, and we are now working on strategic work plans to ensure their work aligns with our DRT partners, the Racial Equity Office, the RT team, and all the collective goals of the service. The Indigenous community mobilizers will have their team complete with the addition of a 4th and final member in the upcoming weeks. This competition closed on September 7th, with interviews to be completed this week. And yesterday, the Indigenous community mobilizers also completed their final presentations which completes their onboarding training with the CPS. With respect to our hate crime prevention team, our 2023 Report Hate campaign is well underway, and we are excited to partner with the Calgary Football Club to raise awareness of hate crimes and incidents on how to report them. Our crime prevention team continues to work in partnership with the Coordinated Safety Response Team, CSRT, with respect to antisocial and criminal behavior at and around problem properties within the city. To date, the CSRT has ensured the demolition, closure, or renovations of over 500 properties, including 21 problem properties and 19 scheduled for future demolition. The crime prevention team will be revamping operational cold start to incorporate year-round car theft messaging and tips on preventing theft. And in August, the team met and shared numerous presentations to several businesses on topics such as cybercrimes, online frauds and scams, and the bike index. As you all know, we have been working diligently with our partners on transforming crisis response to ensure the right person gets the right resource at the right time. I would like to take the opportunity to provide a few updates on some of our initiatives. The 911-211 co-location. Over the last month, this project has seen a dramatic increase in calls being transferred from Calgary 911 to our 211 partners. In fact, in August alone, there were 797 calls transferred. This is the most we have ever seen. Since February 2022, we've had over 6,100 calls transferred. Within these transfers, 211 staff managed to provide over 9,400 resources to vulnerable Calgarians seeking assistance. Since December 2022, when the partnerships decided to transfer mental health and suicide calls to 211, Calgary 911 have transferred 588 mental health and suicide calls directly to 211. That means 211 were able to support those suffering from mental health and or suicide issues directly, not requiring an emergency service response. To date, this has been one of the most successful initiatives relating to crisis transformation. The HELP, formerly called the DOPE team, the partnership with the Alpha House in transferring unwanted guests calls in District 1 has been very impactful, with crisis workers able to support the unhoused or those needing social supports which would otherwise manifest themselves as calls for service for police. Since August 2022, there were 4,140 calls taken by 211 who dispatched the HELP team. Over 50% of those calls came directly from community. Moreover, it should be noted that HELP had a 96% acceptance rate in taking those calls. Only 4% of the time did HELP deem it more appropriate for EMS, CPS, or for bylaw encampment to attend. With respect to PACT, in the spring of this year, you'll recall that the GOA announced they would be funding 12 additional mental health clinicians to expand that program. Over the past few months, the team has been working hard with AHS and district leadership on developing a new deployment model that will enhance our current model. This new model will include 4 mental health clinicians that will be attached to the existing downtown beat teams. This is to provide more visibility in the downtown core. Secondly, there will be district PAC clinicians in every district. These clinicians will work more collaboratively with the district CROs on supporting those who have been identified as needing a more case management approach. The district PACT clinicians will also be available to support crime management strategies and support our heavy system users. The funding also provides support to our arrest processing unit, where there will be clinicians working to support detainees while in custody. Just quickly on our RIMHAC, the Real-Time Integrated Mental Health and Addiction Center, one of my favorites. We remain committed to this vision. Last month at the Finance and Audit Subcommittee meeting, we advised that we've been working with the city and community partners on a potential location. A location has been explored, and tomorrow we are meeting with our partners to discuss the viability of this potential site. The service has developed and is working with core community partners on signing an MOU which sets out the details for co-location. And we are actively working on formalizing our strategic plan and hiring consultants to assist. This plan will include a governance structure, a community engagement plan, training for our potential partnerships, and performance measures amongst other needed tasks. We've recently been working on our branding for this initiative regardless of location. Many of you will recall that the service made a commitment to looking at our service delivery model in relation to persons in crisis. So lastly, I want to read very briefly a summary as a reminder as to how in one way we got here today. Their plan wasn't to end up in crisis. The events in their lives that led them to this moment are different in every case, but each one of them have one thing in common. They need help right here and right now. And for years, the way we answered that call wasn't working. We recognized we could do better for people in crisis. We could transform our approach, and in doing that, the lives of the people who need help. Like most transformations, it starts when we break down the walls, get around the same table, in the same room. When all the people who are best equipped to help people in crisis are together, figuring it out. When we recognize that being in crisis isn't a crime, but rather an opportunity for us to offer life-saving services to people in distress, to keep them out of the criminal justice system, and to provide the support they actually need. RIMHAC isn't just transforming how we care for people in mental health or addictions crisis, it's transforming and saving lives. It's taking pressure off the criminal justice and health systems, and it's doing that from one central hub where we can offer the right resources at the right time and the right place to lift people up out of crisis, and most importantly, to get them the help they so rightly deserve. Thank you, Chair. Those are my updates.
Thank you very much. And I'll turn it to commissioners for questions. Commissioner Mallon, go ahead.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Those numbers actually are far greater than you anticipated at a more rapid rate. I'm wondering, I know it's early days, but I'm wondering if we've got a plan for trying to measure the impact downstream on all the other systems. You know, in the not-for-profit sector, they have this model called the social value of intervention, and they do it in terms of reduced emergency visits, you know, and they cost them. And this, I think, would be amenable to really quantifying the impact on all the integrated systems, but it's not going to be easy. And I just wondered if you'd had any thoughts about how we might start collecting data in such a way that we were able to demonstrate the social return on investment, basically.
Yeah, great question, Commissioner, through the chair. Thanks very much. As you said, this is not easy. This is complex. And you know what? We've often sat around the table and said we might not be able to solve all of this, but we're making progress. And one of that is the collection of data to see how we're making a difference. Of course, the collection of the data, as we know through simple things, not simple things, but things like race-based data, there is lots of privacy issues. How do we collect it? Who gets to give it? Who gets to disclose it? But it's certainly at the table. It's certainly being discussed. I can't emphasize enough the great, amazing partnerships that we have at the table. Everybody wants to do it. It's just how do we do it? So it's certainly on the table. Don't have an answer for you today, but it's something that we are looking at together.
Thank you. Commissioner Campbell.
Thanks very much for that report, Deputy Chief McClellan. And I know that Superintendent Rashid and Inspector Martin are back there doing that incredible work to put together the report and contribute to your comments. But I'm not going to leave without actually reminding people of some of the words you just said. Being in crisis isn't a crime. I'd say it 3 times because people say that you need to say things 3 times for them to remember it, but I'll say it once and hope that all of us remember that. I'd also remind folks of something that you said in Newfoundland and Labrador back in August when we were talking about outcomes from some of the great work that has happened with respect to the successful co-location of 211 and 911 dispatch and the work that we're proceeding with on RIMHAC. And it was the idea that the outcomes will often be in healthcare and not necessarily in policing. And so to Commissioner Mallon's question, we really do need to think about how we can track what I think will be really substantial and positive outcomes for community. that won't necessarily come within our purview because of the nature of the work that we're doing. So I offer you that. My actual question is something related to a situation from last week. And it's really about being able to manage the hate speech that occurred at the anti-2S LGBTQ rally on Wednesday, September 20th. And in this case, I'm specifically referring to a child who was coerced by a man who, if I'm correct, may already have charges against him already for alleged online hate crimes or comments. So thinking about how we protect the community, how we protect community members, how we protect Calgarians from having just horrible hate speech hurled and spewed at them for no other reason than they want to exist. So thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Tange. Oh, sorry, I'm going to ask you, did you have a response that you wanted to make?
So sorry, what was the actual question?
Yeah, thank you.
My apologies.
It's okay. Sorry, Deputy Chief McClellan. It was really about how are we managing the hate speech that occurred last week at that rally, and how do we protect Calgarians from having that kind of hateful venom spewed their way simply because those folks want to exist.
Thanks, Commissioner, through the chair. So thanks for those comments and that feedback and that question. I can't speak specifically to that incident. As you hear us always say, there is no place for hate in this city. And the team gave that presentation, I think, a month or two ago, and they shared all of the work that they're doing. It's really through awareness, through education, through support, engagement, having those conversations, lots of work being done, as you know, with many of my teams, through the MASS team, the YARD team, the ISSP, amazing work being done in YouthLink with the school resource officers and through frontline patrol. It's that constant, those constant conversations and just bringing it to people's attention that when these kinds of incidents happen, we need to be engaged, we need to be involved, and as you know, we will deal with it.
Thank you. And we're going to go to Commissioner North Pagan first, and then Commissioner Tange. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair. There's a couple of things that I learned on my travels throughout the summer. And the first one is forgiveness. And it actually came from, I think it was an AAPG conference or CAPG, wherever that was. It was in Winnipeg. And when they were talking about the Indigenous community and the police force or their police service there has to be some kind of mechanism that both tables are going to come to the table, come to the talks with forgiveness. So it has to come on both sides. And the more I listen to stories across the nation, the more I listen to them close to home, the more this really resonates with me. There has to be some kind of, in Winnipeg, they had the symbol of the feather, of the eagle feather, because that feather constantly needs work. Like the relationship between the Indigenous and the police always needs work. So that mechanism of forgiveness was one thing that I learned, and it came from this table. The other one is consent, and this came to me at a very unusual training session in Winnipeg, traditional health sex class, which was just, I text my mom this list. She never texted me back for 2 days. But consent, we Indigenous people ask for consent to pick medicines. They ask for consent to take wisdom from an elder. Everything has to do with consent. So if there's an idea there on how we can actually, promote that out into the community. But those were two huge themes that came from me. CPS is doing a tremendous amount of work, but at some point we have to get the community to the table, and we have to have that forgiveness, and we have to have that consent. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner North Pagan. Wise words. And Commissioner Tange.
hard to follow both of the last two. I have no wise words. I do have a comment about the research that was brought up, and I'm wondering if you're pairing with any of the universities in order to collect the research. I think that when you're doing excellent work, peer-reviewed papers make a huge difference in that work so that it can be shared to other services around the world. The other question I have is on the expertise side. While many of our not-for-profits work extremely hard out there, they often lack expertise. And when you're putting together programs for addiction and mental health, understanding the epidemiology and etiology of the disorders that you're working with is going to be extremely important, not just providing comfort and safety, but also how do we support treatment and moving forward. We know the GOA is working hard with the recovery-oriented system of care. And we know in Edmonton that many of the services of addiction treatment is occurring inside of remand and inside of central processing, which is extremely important. Is that involved in this? Is there funding coming from that? Because that's a huge piece. And in doing so, that can also bring in the Matheson Center and the University of Calgary to actually look at the outcomes and results of it. Rather than us trying to interpret data here, you can actually get something that makes sense. So just a thought and question.
Great, through the chair, Commissioner. Thanks very much for your question and for your comments. So yes and yes. We are working with, so we've hired a consultant company that's been helping us gather all of this research and this data and this work. So I do believe that they have partnered with our post-secondary partners. And I think there's lots of people at the table who are helping us with their research, and not really sure what their role is. I can't speak to that here today, but I can certainly get back to you. But I know there's been lots of involvement, lots of engagement with those individuals. You're absolutely bang on with respect to the expertise, and we're doing our best to bring as many people to the table as possible. Lots of conversations, as you probably know, with the GOA, with funding. What does that look like? What's the sustainability of the funding? That's the piece that we've always talked about. And so lots of conversations about going on with both those pieces. Thank you.
Thank you. Any last questions on any of the reports or anything that we've missed from the service side?
I think that's it, Chair. Thanks.
Great. Then I will say thank you for all of those reports and the incredible work that's going on in so many different areas of the service. So thank you very much. With that, we can move on to the next portions of our public agenda. The first one being Executive Director's Report. There's nothing to report in public this month. This next piece, we will take a moment to hear from the commissioners who represent our commission on various associations and committees. So I'll start, I don't know, is Commissioner Tang here yet? No, he's not here yet. He is our member on the Alberta Association for Police Governance. His report was posted, and the commission can read it there. The second person is Commissioner Siddiqui for a report on the Canadian Association for Police Governance.
Nothing.
Okay, the report is posted. Any questions for Commissioner Siddiqui? No, hearing none. I will move on. And there's a report from myself as a member of the Calgary Police Youth Foundation. It's pretty straightforward, and I don't have anything to add. Are there any questions? Nope. Okay, then finally, I will ask Commissioner North Pagan if you have anything additional or comments for the Alberta Law Enforcement Response Team's Civilian Advisory Committee.
We have yet to hold our fall session or our fall meeting, so I should have a report for you in the next public session.
Great, thank you, Commissioner. That is the end of the presentations and reports for today. We'll now invite public guests who've registered to speak to do so. Our public participation process is designed to balance the desire to hear from the public with the need to keep meetings at a reasonable length. Those of you who registered to provide a presentation will have 4 minutes to speak, followed by commissioners having an opportunity to ask brief clarifying questions. Those who register to ask a question will have 2 minutes to speak, followed by a member of the Commission or Calgary Police Service having 2 minutes to respond. Please keep your comments on the topic you provided when registered. We also can't discuss complaint about a specific employee or interaction with the police. If you'd like to discuss a complaint against an officer or other employee, please contact our public complaint director or the Calgary Police Service Professional Standards section so that it can be properly addressed. I'd also like to thank everyone who took time to send us written submissions prior to this meeting. They have been provided to everyone on the commission, and we appreciate your insights. And finally, a reminder to members of the media, we'll hear from the public first, and then we'll hold the media availability for you afterwards. So can you please put through the first speaker? Thanks.
Absolutely, Chair. Our first speaker is Mr. Ewan Thompson, and he has a question for us on safe supply. Mr. Thompson, you should be able to speak now.
Hi, thank you. Can you hear me okay?
We can, yes.
All right, great. I'm going to be asking about safe supply for sure. I just wanted to quickly touch on an item that Commissioner Tanguay brought up recently in the meeting. I just wanted to raise the alarm about Compassionate Intervention Act. As he opened that conversation about 25 minutes ago or so, talking about options for moving people out of transit and out of the streets and so on, and into treatment. I think that this is really ill-conceived, and it's an opportunity for us to take an evidence-based approach, which does not involve forced abstinence of people against their will, against informed consent. It's an opportunity really for Commission to put its foot down and direct the police in a way that is evidence-based and involving informed consent. Now, I just had a quick question for you all, and thanks for bearing with me there. The evidence piling up that safe opioid supply serves as a significant crime prevention strategy in cities across Canada should no longer be ignored. In Vancouver, they're reporting 50% decrease in police interactions for people that are on the safe opioid supply there. In London, Ontario, they're reporting a 78% decrease. To any conflicted commission member who is no doubt thinking right now that people who use drugs can't be trusted to self-report on their interactions with police, I urge consideration of the dehumanizing history they are playing into, and a further consideration that every safe supply pilot in this country is being evaluated by people with extensive training in statistics and evaluation. So I'll dedicate my question to this. Yet again, I was here a year ago doing the same. Why does Calgary Police Commission continue to ignore the quote unquote crime prevention implications of safe supply, given Commission's mandate to quote, establish policies providing for efficient and effective policing and to issue instructions as necessary to the chief in regards to these policies, unquote? Will Calgary Police Commission commit to redirecting Calgary Police crime prevention funding toward a safe supply program in this city? Thank you so much.
Thank you for that question. And thank you for raising it again. I guess from the Commission's perspective, safe supply is something that would need to occur through the healthcare system. Police are not qualified to prescribe, administer, provide drugs to people. So it's not something that we can implement as a commission. I think another point is that safe supply cannot occur without other levels of government being involved. You commented that many are evaluating this. The government of Alberta is no different. It has made its position clear that it does not support providing drugs to people outside of treatment plans. And finally, we recognize that drug users need compassionate care. And we're very open to the police being part of the solution, but we are not able to unilaterally implement a policy like that around safe supply to police. So I would ask if there are any other comments to add to that, but those are my comments. I don't see any other comments being offered. So thank you very much for the question. I appreciate you raising it. And those are the perspectives and the discussion that's gone on at Commission itself. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair. Our next speaker is Jocelyn Keith Asante from the Calgary Alliance for the Common Good on Truth and Reconciliation. Just give me a moment to find my button here. There you go, Ms. Keith Asante. You should be able to speak.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can, yes.
Thank you very much. Hello, I'm Jocelyn Keith Asante from the Calgary Alliance for the Common Good Truth and Reconciliation Research Action Team. I'm here to share with you what we did in our summer vacation. As we discussed, When we last spoke with the Commission, 3 of the Truth and Reconciliation Research Action Team attended at the first local screening of Calgary's documentary on police oversight and violence and no visible trauma. We won't detail the importance of this June 30 screening, which was preceded by showings in many other cities. We were one of many groups attending this important discussion of the inappropriate use of power. We estimate nearly 200 people attending at the Central Library Theatre, asking questions and discussing ideas with the panel, which consisted of documentarists, victims of police violence, legal experts, and us. Subsequent to the screening, public commentaries fell into 2 topics. First, that the violence depicted and discussed was quite disturbing in what we think of as a moderate Canadian city. 2, and secondly, it was noticed that we represented Indigenous concerns about police violence, though the documentary didn't delve into much at all, which is why we were invited to bring that depth to the conversation as the screening promoters look to support and inform the actions of local citizens. Sadly, none of the documentary's follow-ups nor the informed community participation that night changed the filmmakers' original said on their website. This is not the film we would have liked to make about Calgary, the city where we were born and raised. Throughout the 5 years spent working on this film, we've been profoundly disturbed by the violence and dysfunction of the Calgary Police Service and the devastating impacts on the victims and their families of a justice system that refuses to hold police officers to account for their actions. Consequently, we continue to meet with the CPS leadership and the CPS recruiting leadership as they try to recruit Indigenous officers. We appreciate the updated today from Deputy Chief McClellan and her report, and we are looking forward to our meeting with Sergeant Tetley and her team on October 2nd. Recently, however, it has come to our attention that a new HR hire, Kim Armstrong, Chief People Officer, has many red flags that have accompanied her to this position. They are described in these links that I would love to share with you. These detail Kim Armstrong's progression from law school to someone who has had huge issues as head of internal affairs for Edmonton Police, where she was busy covering up a racist email Scott Carter wrote in 2002 that circulated in the department for 3 years. A trail that included statements such as an Aboriginal is just an Indian. The email referred to the EPS van used to transport mostly Aboriginal street people as the Mobile Native Friendship Center. 20 years later, this same person gets charged with 2 counts of assault, 1 on a peace officer. When people show you who they are, believe them. To someone who had huge issues as a deputy attorney general. CBC News revealed on July 22nd, 2014, memo written by Grant and signed by Armstrong, which stated, the ultimate goal of a Crown prosecutor is to see that the accused is convicted of any charges that are brought against.
I'm going to interrupt at this because I think that you may have a point. You may have had a point when you started your conversation. I don't think that this entitles you to speak to a new member of the police service in a disrespectful way. So if you have a single point that you would like to conclude with, please go ahead. Otherwise, we'll say thank you for your thoughts and move on. Do you have a comment that you'd like to make in summary?
Yes, I do. Calgary Police Commission, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
How could you have approved this hire when you opened this meeting in such a good way? Thank you. And again, I'd be happy to share those links with you.
We rely on the service and we support the service in the work that they do around finding people to serve this community. And over the last number of years, they have done a remarkable job at bringing this service forward in terms of serving the community from all different respects. So I will say that we have supported all of the personnel things that they've done, and we appreciate your concerns, but at this point, we will support and continue to support the service in the work that they do and continue our work as a community group to provide oversight as we go forward. So thank you very much.
Chair, that concludes our public speakers.
Thank you. We have made notes on these presentations, appreciate people taking time to participate, and look forward to future conversations as we go forward. With that, I will say thank you to everyone for joining us today. The public participation session brings us to the end of our public agenda. So we'll now adjourn the public portion of this month's commission meeting And thank you to everyone for coming, and I hope you have a great evening. Acting Chief Tofik, Executive Director Catherine Murphy, and I will remain behind to answer questions from the media. Everyone is welcome to stay and watch our media availability, but only recognized members of the media will be able to participate. Commissioners and members of the service participating in the in-camera portion of our meeting will take a 15-minute break before continuing. Please keep this room as quiet as you possibly can until the media availability is finished. And if you are joining remotely, please remember to rejoin us in the in-camera link. So with that, we'll take just a moment to reorganize the room and then move on to the media availability.
Sorry for the delay. We're getting set up here. So if you are with media, please ensure that your name in Zoom does include your media outlet so that we can know who we are calling on, and then raise your hand and we'll call on you for questions. The first person we have with their hand raised is Julie from CBC Calgary. Julie, you should be able to go ahead now.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. So my first question is just in terms of today's sentencing, could you kind of elaborate on the impact a day like today has, and just what your comment is on what's going through your mind and the members?
Thanks for the question, Julie. I can tell you that for all of us in the CPS, it's a very difficult day when you have to hear what the sentence is, because for many, you think this is a lifetime of impact. So it's something that everyone will reflect on, and I've talked to a number of members today about that, and it affects people differently in different ways. On one hand, there's some sense of closure. On the other hand, others feel that it never would be enough, and I think that's normal because the impacts are lifelong, and you think about the family of Andrew Harnett, the members, the close friends who are impacted and will be forever. So I don't know that anything would satisfy it, but at least people know where it sits now.
Julie, do you have a follow-up?
Yeah, I was going to ask about crypto crimes. It was mentioned that you finally have a way to help people who are impacted by it. Can you elaborate on that and just what people, especially seniors, can do if they are victims of crypto crime?
Sure, I'm going to pass it over to Acting Deputy Chief Ryan Aliff, because he's working very closely on a number of cyber-related initiatives, including blockchain and others. So I'll turn it over to him.
Thanks for the question. We're doing a couple things. So I'll say this, it's because of our most recent partnership that we are exploring. It's a pilot partnership with a private company that allows us to train officers en masse in taking crypto reports. So before, I would say, even as recently as 6 months ago, when an officer would attend a call, if it was a cryptocurrency related fraud or scam, most of our officers, their response would be, there's nothing we can do. And that's very common still across Canada. And so we recognized that we didn't have an answer, and we did not want to have no answer for this. We want to help Calgarians in this space and all other cyberspaces. We worked through this partnership, and now we're on pace to have at least 70 officers in the front line trained that will be able to take these reports, understand what a crypto wallet is, understand how to trace, have some answers, be able to connect to our blockchain investigative team, which is the only standalone team that I'm aware of in Canada that we have now through this partnership that can create the ability for us to trace. If we get the complaint in quickly, we can get some remediation possibly. We also want to work with this team to start creating messages, not just for the average Calgarian or senior, but we want to work towards a cyber fusion center or a cyber center concept that would allow us to have an answer, not just for the everyday Calgarian, but the everyday small business person, mid-level business, larger business. We want to be in a space where if you come to Calgary, we have options to protect our citizens from all sorts of cyber-related crime. So it's very exciting. So I know I kind of expanded there, but I guess the short answer is we're training more officers with relevant crypto-related stuff, and they're going to be able to connect to our standalone blockchain and investigative team.
Okay, thank you. We will move on to Adam Toy. Just give us a moment here, Adam, and you should be able to talk. Adam, you should be free to talk now.
Great. Thank you so much for taking my questions. Question for Deputy Chief Tawfik or for the Executive Director Murphy. Fewer complaints coming into PSS. Wondering if there's any insight as to why that is. Is that an improved policing culture, or it's a notable decrease? But I'm just wondering if there's any insights as to why.
Thanks for the question. I'll turn it over to Catherine here very quickly, but I think there's been a focus over the last couple of years on the types of conduct of our members. And, you know, I do have to give credit to our members in how they respond to that and pay attention to the things that they see coming across the professional standards desk. We've done a fair bit of communication internally around what we're seeing, and that helps educate our members around expectations and such. So I have to give some credit to them, but Catherine would be in a better place to talk about the PSS impacts and how that would have unfolded.
I would echo Deputy Tawfik's comments. I do have to give credit to the membership. I do think it's an indicator of performance. I think body-worn camera probably plays a role in that, but I don't take the results for granted. We want to ensure that lower numbers are not due to a lack of engagement with police as well, right? With any sort of hesitancy around filing a complaint. So we look at it carefully, and then we mix that with sort of other performance metrics we look at in terms of what complaints are related to, who they're coming from, when they're coming in, to try to get a better sense of what's going on. I would say though that the complaints decreased, but they're actually in line with the 5-year average now. So we did see a spike coming out of COVID, but now it's gone back to around the 5-year average, which tells me we're back to more of a normalized state in terms of our numbers of complaints.
Adam, do you have a follow-up?
Question, and I'd like to get response from the commission and from the deputy chief there. With regards to body-worn cameras south of the border, we have seen documented instances where officers will turn off their cameras for whatever reasons. Some may say it's for nefarious, others may say it's for policing reasons. I'm wondering if there's any concerns about that possibility of kind of the manipulation of when the body-worn cameras are on and when they're used by officers.
Yeah, thanks for the question. And certainly Catherine can chime in as well, but we have a very strong policy around our body-worn camera usage. and the expectations of our members when to activate and deactivate. And if they do deactivate, that they articulate why that they are taking that step, because there are some times where you may have to. So those expectations are very clear. And the other aspect to that would be when you have multiple officers on scene, there's often more than one body-worn camera around. So there are a lot of reasons why that hasn't really been a huge problem. But when it does, or if it does, it's taken very seriously. Anything to add?
Again, I echo the comments. If we see a file and we see deactivation of body-worn camera, we discipline for that in and of itself. So we have seen compliance with body-worn camera increase significantly since it was rolled out in 2019 as members get used to it, and also as we reinforce through the accountability process that it's completely unacceptable to turn your body-worn camera off unless you're doing that in alignment with policy and with an articulated rationale.
And as Commissioner, I don't have anything to add other than we have asked that question over the last couple of years as body-worn cameras have come into use more broadly through the service. So it's something that we have kept an eye on, and you've just heard what the service is doing with that. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We will now go to Bill Kaufman from Post Media. Bill, you should be able to speak. We see you there, Bill, but we can't hear you. Okay, I don't know if you're there still, but we're unable to hear you. So we will come back. We have Julie from CBC. You still have your hand up. Is that another set of questions you have?
I can ask another question.
You are welcome to. Yeah, you're welcome to.
Just in terms of, there's been a police shooting in BC and here, just in, just what we've kind of gone through. It was mentioned by the chair earlier that there were some legislative changes happening to try to prevent that. Can you give an overview of what's happening to try to prevent police shootings and what still needs to be done?
And I'll ask for others to add to this, but the main ones that we're thinking of from a commission perspective is the legislation around bail and release and holding people in custody for longer than the very short period of time that happens, so that the so-called catch and release isn't such a big issue. The other thing is trying to get people who are on probation or have illegally have firearms when they shouldn't and have already been charged for that. How do we then up the ante in terms of keeping them in custody so they're off the streets and not targeting civilians and police officers as well? I don't know if you want to add to that.
I just reiterate the expectation of accountability around violent crime and firearms related offenses. And as per Acting Deputy Chief Aliff's comments on his crime update, we have examples where people who have committed firearms crimes are then subsequently released and then commit further victimization. And those are the things that we want to put steps and things in place to prevent that from happening. So those are, I think, the key aspects around that.
Okay, thank you. And Bill, we will go back to you for one last call to see if you got your mic working. Oh, we can't hear you. If you want to give me a call, Bill, we can get you questions on the phone. So Chair, that concludes our media availability, and that concludes our meeting for today. Thank you, everybody.